Arthur Sterling stood motionless in his study, his fingers tracing the edge of his mahogany desk as he watched Vivian pack the last of her designer clothes into a Louis Vuitton suitcase. 27 years of marriage reduced to this moment. Yet his expression remained unchanged, a mask of practiced calm that revealed nothing of the calculations already forming in his mind. "You're really doing this?" His voice carried no emotion, just a simple question that hung in the air between them. Vivian turned, her perfectly manicured hands clutching a silk blouse. "Don't act surprised, Arthur. We both know this has been coming for a long time." She folded the blouse with deliberate precision. "I'm tired of pretending to be satisfied with this. This mediocrity." Arthur's eyebrow raised slightly. "Is that what you call our life together?" "Look at you." Vivian gestured dismissively. "Content with your safe investments, your predictable routine. When was the last time you took a risk? When was the last time you showed any ambition?" She zipped the suitcase with a sharp, final sound. "Julian understands what I need. He's not afraid to reach for more." "Julian Thorne." Arthur spoke the name quietly, testing it on his tongue. "The CEO of Thorne Industries." "Yes, Arthur. Julian Thorne." Vivian's voice carried a note of triumph. "A man who knows what he wants and takes it, who drives a Bentley instead of that practical sedan you insist on keeping, who owns a yacht and takes spontaneous trips to Monaco." She pulled off her wedding ring, the diamond catching the light one last time. "It's time for an upgrade." The ring made a soft clicking sound as it hit Arthur's desk, rolling slightly before coming to rest. He didn't reach for it. "And what makes you think Julian Thorne will give you everything you desire?" Arthur's question was soft, almost gentle. Vivian laughed, the sound brittle and harsh. "He already has. The penthouse overlooking Central Park, the private jet access, the status of being with a real power player." She straightened her designer jacket. "Face it, Arthur. You were never going to be more than this. I've wasted enough years waiting for you to become something exceptional." Arthur's phone buzzed quietly in his pocket. He ignored it, maintaining eye contact with his wife of nearly 3 decades. "You always did have expensive taste, Vivian. I remember when you used to appreciate the value of earning things rather than having them handed to you." "Earning things?" Vivian scoffed. "Like you've earned anything. Playing it safe, always in the background, never making waves." She grabbed the handle of her suitcase. "Julian's driver is waiting. I won't be coming back." Arthur watched her walk to the door, her heels clicking against the floor. "You're right about one thing, Vivian. It is time for an upgrade." She paused, her hand on the doorknob. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing you need to concern yourself with anymore." Arthur turned away, dismissing her. "Give my regards to Julian." The door closed behind her with a decisive click. Arthur waited, counting the seconds until he heard the front door open and close, followed by the sound of a car engine starting and fading away. Only then did he move, walking to a hidden panel in the bookshelf. His fingers found the concealed latch, revealing a wall safe. From inside, he retrieved a thick folder marked Thorne Industries. As he spread the contents across his desk, a slight smile played at the corners of his mouth. Stock certificates, proxy statements, and complex ownership diagrams filled the pages. At the center of it all, a single document showed the truth. Through a carefully constructed network of shell companies and trusts, Arthur Sterling owned 51% of Thorne Industries. He pulled out his phone, dialing a familiar number. "Hector, it's time. Initiate Project Phoenix." He paused, listening to the response. "Yes, everything we discussed. I want Julian's entire operation laid bare. Finances, personal life, every dirty deal he's ever made. Leave no stone unturned." Another pause. "No, Hector. No mistakes. No loose ends. Julian Thorne is about to learn the cost of taking what's mine." Arthur's voice carried no anger, only cold certainty. "And Hector, make sure our ownership remains hidden for now. Let's not spoil the surprise." After ending the call, Arthur poured himself a glass of scotch and walked to the window. The city spread out before him, lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. He took a sip, savoring the burn. His phone buzzed again, a message from Bart Finch, his lawyer. "Everything in place. Ready when you are." Arthur typed a quick response. "Begin the process. No mercy." Later that evening, Arthur found himself at the Blue Room, a high-end bar downtown. He sat at the counter, nursing another scotch, when a woman took the seat next to him. "Rough day?" she asked, ordering a martini. Arthur studied her reflection in the mirror behind the bar. "You could say that. My wife of 27 years left me today for another man." "I'm Clara," she offered, turning to face him. "And believe it or not, I know exactly how you feel. My husband of 15 years left me for his secretary 6 months ago." "Arthur," he introduced himself. "How did you handle it?" Clara's laugh was bitter. "Not well, at first. Cried, screamed, begged him to come back. Pathetic. Really." She took a sip of her martini. "But then I realized something. He did me a favor, showed me who he really was before I wasted any more years of my life on him." Arthur nodded slowly. "And now?" "Now," Clara smiled. "Now I'm rebuilding. Starting over. It's not easy, but it's better than living a lie." She pulled out a business card. "I run a support group for people who've been through similar situations. You should come by sometime." Arthur accepted the card, tucking it into his pocket. "Thank you, Clara, but I have a feeling my recovery process will be somewhat different." "Oh." Clara raised an eyebrow. "How so?" Arthur's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Let's just say I believe in karma. And sometimes karma needs a little help." He finished his scotch and stood. "Keep in touch, Clara. I have a feeling we might be able to help each other in the future." As he walked out of the bar, Arthur's phone buzzed once more. A message from Hector. "First phase complete. You won't believe what I found. Meeting tomorrow." Arthur's response was immediate. "My office, 8 a.m. Show me everything." The game had begun, and Arthur Sterling was playing for keeps. Vivian and Julian were about to learn that they'd mistaken his calculated patience for weakness. Arthur's study had transformed into a command center. Monitors displayed stock prices and financial data, while papers covered every available surface. Maps of corporate holdings and ownership structures created a web of information that only he fully understood. Hector Ramirez sat across from him, his laptop open, dark circles under his eyes testament to a sleepless night of digging. "You're not going to believe what I found, Mr. Sterling." "Show me," Arthur commanded, leaning forward. "First, the obvious stuff." Hector pulled up a series of documents on his laptop. Tax evasion through offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, standard rich guy stuff. But he got sloppy, left a clear paper trail. Arthur's expression remained neutral. "Continue. The interesting part is the blackmail." Hector clicked through several files. "Thorne's been systematically targeting his competitors. He gets compromising information, forces them to sell their shares at cut-rate prices, then absorbs their companies. And the safety violations. Jesus, where do I start?" Hector shook his head. 3 deaths in his factories in the past 2 years, all covered up. Bribes to safety inspectors, falsified reports. One family was about to go public. Their lawyer had a convenient car accident. Arthur's fingers drummed on his desk. "Evidence. All here." Hector patted his laptop. "Bank transfers, emails, everything." The man's arrogant enough to keep records. Probably thinks he's untouchable. "Good work." Arthur stood, walking to his wall safe. Before he could open it, a knock at the door interrupted him. "Come in." Bart Finch strode in, his usual flamboyant suit at odds with his serious expression. "Arthur, my friend. The pieces are in place." He dropped a thick folder on the desk. "Everything's legal. Everything's clean. When we move, there won't be a damn thing they can do about it." "Walk me through it," Arthur commanded. Bart spread out various documents. We've been accumulating shares through 17 different shell companies over the past decade. Each purchase perfectly timed. None big enough to trigger reporting requirements. The ownership structure is beautiful. Layers of holding companies, trusts, offshore entities. It would take an army of forensic accountants months to untangle it all. And Julian has no idea. Bart chuckled. He thinks he's untouchable. Today at lunch, I watched him and Vivian at Lou Bernardi. He was bragging about how he's going to expand the company, buy out his competitors. Arthur's expression hardened. Tell me about Vivian. Hanging on his every word, Bart reported. They weren't even trying to be discreet. She was practically in his lap, showing off some new diamond bracelet. Several board members were there. They looked uncomfortable, but nobody dared say anything. Perfect. Arthur turned to Hector. Start feeding information about the safety violations to Isabella Vargas at the police department. Anonymously, of course. She's honest. She'll follow where the evidence leads. Already on it. Hector confirmed. I've also identified weak points in their 8 security. When the time comes, I can access everything. Speaking of timing, Bart interjected. When do we pull the trigger? Arthur walked to his window, watching the city below. Let them dig themselves deeper. Julian's pride will make him careless. Each public appearance with Vivian, each show of arrogance will make the fall more spectacular. He turned back to his conspirators. Bart, prepare the default notices. Have them ready, but don't file yet. Hector, continue monitoring and gathering evidence. I want to know every move they make, every dollar they spend, every secret they think is safe. And Vivian, Bart asked carefully. She made her choice. Arthur's voice was ice. She chose wealth over loyalty, status over honor. Let her enjoy her upgrade while it lasts. As if on cue, his phone buzzed with a news alert. It was a society page photo of Julian and Vivian at a charity gala, his hand possessively on her waist, her smile triumphant. The caption read, Thorne Industries CEO Julian Thorne with companion at the Metropolitan Museum benefit. Companion, Arthur mused, his smile cold. How fitting. Sir, Hector spoke up. I've been monitoring their spending. In the past week alone, Julian's bought her over $200,000 in jewelry, a new Mercedes, and put a down payment on a penthouse. Let him spend, Arthur replied. Every dollar will make the crash more devastating. He turned to Bart. How quickly can we move once we pull the trigger? Everything's structured for maximum impact. When we reveal our ownership position and file the default notices, it'll hit like a tsunami. The stock will plummet, investors will panic, and Julian's leverage will evaporate overnight. And legally, he won't have a leg to stand on. Bart's grin was predatory. We've documented every violation, every illegal transaction. The SEC will have a field day. And with Detective Vargas investigating the safety violations, criminal charges are almost certain. Arthur nodded, satisfied. Then we wait. Let them think they're invincible. Let them flaunt their relationship, spend their money, make their plans. He picked up the society page photo. The higher they climb, the harder they'll fall. What about the company itself? Hector asked. Thorne Industries employs thousands of people. The company will survive, Arthur assured him. Under new management, of course. We'll clean house, implement proper safety protocols, end the corruption. Sometimes you have to break something down completely before you can rebuild it properly. Another knock at the door revealed Arthur's housekeeper. Mr. Sterling, there's a delivery for you. It was a large envelope. Divorce papers from Vivian's lawyer. Arthur skimmed them briefly before handing them to Bart. Handle this. Give her exactly what the law requires, not a penny more. And the house? Bart asked. Let her fight for it, Arthur decided. It'll keep her distracted from what's really happening. He turned back to his conspirators. Gentlemen, I've spent years building this trap. Every detail has been considered, every contingency planned for. Julian Thorne thinks he's claimed a prize. Instead, he's walked right into my web, and he brought Vivian with him. He raised his glass in a mock toast. To new beginnings. As Bart and Hector left, Arthur returned to his desk, reviewing the documents before him. On his computer screen, Thorne Industries' stock price ticker showed another record high. Soon, very soon, everything would change. And when it did, the world would learn what happens to those who betray Arthur Sterling. The 50th floor of Thorne Industries headquarters buzzed with nervous energy. Julian Thorne stood at the head of the conference table, his expensive suit a stark contrast to his reddening face as he berated a junior executive. Incompetent, he roared, slamming his hand on the polished table. Do you have any idea how much money your mistake could have cost us? The young executive, Thomas Chin, struggled to maintain his composure. Mr. Thorne, I apologize, but if you'll let me explain. Explain? Julian's laugh was cruel. Explain how you nearly leaked confidential merger information to the press. Explain how your carelessness could have tanked our stock price. From her seat beside Julian, Vivian watched with barely concealed disdain. She wore a new Cartier necklace, a recent gift from Julian, and it caught the light as she shifted in her chair. Perhaps, she suggested, her voice dripping with false sweetness, Thomas would be better suited to a less demanding position, something more appropriate to his abilities. Julian's smile was predatory. You're right, my dear. Thomas, clear out your desk. Security will escort you out. As Thomas gathered his papers with trembling hands, a knock at the conference room door interrupted the tense scene. Julian's secretary entered, her face pale. Mr. Thorne, there's someone here from the legal department. They say it's urgent. A man in an expensive suit stepped in, holding a thick envelope. Mr. Thorne, I'm James Morton from Corporate Legal. We've just been served with this notice of default from Sterling Holdings, LLC. They're claiming multiple violations of corporate governance rules and financial irregularities. Julian snatched the envelope. Sterling Holdings. Never heard of them. Probably some nuisance suit. He tossed the papers aside. Have our lawyers handle it. Sir, Morton persisted, our preliminary review suggests their claims have merit. Significant merit. They're citing specific transactions that. I said handle it. Julian snapped. That's what we pay you for, isn't it? Now get out. As Morton retreated, Vivian touched Julian's arm. Darling, what's Sterling Holdings? Should we be concerned? It's nothing, Julian assured her, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. Just some corporate vultures trying to make trouble. Happens all the time in my world. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Thorne, Detective Isabella Vargas from the police department is here. She says she has some questions about possible stock manipulation. Julian's face tightened. Tell her I'm in a meeting. She said she'll wait, his secretary replied. Fine, Julian growled. Give me 10 minutes. He turned to the remaining executives. Meeting adjourned. Get out. As the room cleared, Vivian remained, studying Julian's face. This seems serious. It's nothing I can't handle. Julian loosened his tie slightly. Why don't you go shopping? Take the company card. Julian, Vivian's voice carried a note of concern. First that legal notice, now the police. Is there something you're not telling me? Don't worry your pretty head about business matters. Julian dismissed her with a wave. Go, buy yourself something nice. We'll celebrate at Lucirc tonight. Vivian stood, smoothing her designer dress. If you're sure. I am. Julian's phone buzzed. Another message from legal about the default notice. He ignored it. Go. I'll handle this, detective, then join you for dinner. After Vivian left, Julian buzzed his secretary. Send in Detective Vargas. And get my lawyer up here. Detective Isabella Vargas entered the office like she owned it. Her suit was off the rack, but well-tailored, her badge prominently displayed on her belt. She carried a thick folder under her arm. Mr. Thorne, she began without preamble, I'm investigating some unusual trading patterns in Thorn Industries stock, along with allegations of corporate misconduct. Julian leaned back in his chair, projecting confidence. Detective, I run a multi-billion-dollar company. Everything we do is by the book. If you have a specific accusation. I do. Vargas opened her folder. Let's start with the Morton deal last quarter. Your company acquired their assets at 30 cents on the dollar after their CEO suddenly resigned. Interesting timing. Considering the evidence I have suggesting you blackmailed him with certain compromising photos. Julian's smile froze. That's a serious accusation, Detective. One I hope you can prove. Oh, I'm just getting started. Vargas pulled out more documents. There's also the matter of several workplace safety incidents that were never properly reported. Fatal incidents, Mr. Thorne. I have no knowledge of. And then there's this. She placed a financial statement on his desk. Care to explain these offshore transfers? Julian's lawyer chose that moment to enter. Mr. Thorne, don't answer any more questions. Detective, this meeting is over. Vargas gathered her documents unhurriedly. That's fine. I've seen enough for now. She headed for the door, then turned back. Oh, and Mr. Thorne, don't make any travel plans. We'll be talking again soon. After she left, Julian exploded. Find out who's behind this. Someone's trying to destroy me. First that default notice, now this investigation. He paced the office. Call our friends at the SEC. Call Judge Matthews. Call whoever you need to make this go away. Sir, his lawyer interjected. The default notice. It's not just a nuisance suit. Sterling Holdings has significant documentation of irregular transactions. And if they can prove ownership stake. Ownership stake. Julian scoffed. I control this company. Me. No one else has enough shares to. Sir, his secretary interrupted via intercom. Your broker is on line 1. He says it's urgent. Something about a massive sell-off of Thorn Industries stock. Julian grabbed the phone. What? How bad? His face paled as he listened. Stop it. Buy back everything you can. Use whatever resources necessary. He slammed down the phone and turned to his lawyer. Find out everything you can about Sterling Holdings. I want to know who's behind this and what they want. The trap had begun to spring shut, and Julian Thorne was caught, flailing in its jaws. Later that evening, at Lucirc, Julian maintained a facade of normalcy as he dined with Vivian. She chatted about her shopping spree, showing off new purchases while he checked his phone obsessively under the table. Julian? Vivian interrupted his thoughts. Is everything all right? You seem distracted. Everything's fine. He lied, forcing a smile. Just business matters. Across the restaurant, they didn't notice a familiar figure dining alone at the bar. Arthur Sterling sipped his scotch, watching their reflection in the mirror behind the bar. His phone buzzed with a message from Hector. Stock down 12% today. Ready for phase 2. Arthur's response was simple. Proceed. The first moves had been made. The carefully constructed trap was beginning to close, and neither Julian nor Vivian had any idea who was really pulling the strings. Arthur finished his drink and left, knowing that soon, very soon, their world would come crashing down around them. Julian Thorne paced his executive office, phone pressed to his ear. His usual confidence was replaced by barely contained panic. What do you mean you can't stop it? I don't care what it costs. Buy back those shares. The stock ticker on his wall displayed a brutal reality. Thorn Industries down 28% and falling. 3 weeks had passed since Detective Vargas's visit, and everything was unraveling with terrifying speed. His assistant knocked tentatively. Mr. Thorne, the board members are waiting in the conference room. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes. He turned back to his phone. Listen to me, you incompetent fool. I built this company. I won't let it be destroyed by some anonymous corporate raiders. Do whatever you have to do. He slammed the phone down just as Vivian entered, wearing a new Channel suit that now seemed suddenly inappropriate for the circumstances. "Julian, darling, what's happening? The news is saying." "Not now," he snapped, loosening his tie. "I have to deal with the board." "But the apartment? The renovations we planned?" Julian's laugh was harsh. "You're worried about renovations while my company is under attack, while these vultures are trying to tear apart everything I've built." "Our company," Vivian corrected, stepping closer. "We're in this together, aren't we?" He brushed past her without responding, striding toward the conference room, where 8 grim-faced board members awaited. Their expressions told him everything he needed to know. "Gentlemen," he began, but Bernard Matthews, the lead director, cut him off. "Save it, Julian. We've seen the numbers. We've read the reports. Detective Vargas has been interviewing our employees about safety violations. The SEC is asking questions about irregular trading patterns. And now this default notice from Sterling Holdings. All baseless accusations." Julian protested. "I can explain." "Explain the 28% drop in our stock price," another board member demanded. "Explain why our major clients are jumping ship. Explain these photos that were leaked to the press." He slid a newspaper across the table. On the front page was a photo of Julian with one of his blackmail victims, caught in what appeared to be a threatening confrontation. "That's taken out of context," Julian sputtered. "This is a coordinated attack. Someone is trying to destroy us." "Us?" Matthews raised an eyebrow. "No, Julian, they're destroying you. And you're taking the company down with you." "You can't touch me," Julian snarled. "I control this company." "About that." Matthews picked up another document. "We've been doing some digging into the ownership structure. It seems there's been some interesting movement in our shares over the past decade. Care to explain how Sterling Holdings acquired such a significant position without anyone noticing?" Julian's face paled. "What position?" "We're still untangling it," Matthews replied. "But through various shell companies and trusts, they appear to control. Well, let's just say it's enough to make your position here precarious." In his office, Arthur Sterling watched the board meeting through a secure video feed Hector had established. He sat back in his chair, a glass of scotch in hand, as Julian's world began to crumble. "Sir," Hector's voice came through the speakerphone. "Our last batch of share purchases just cleared. We now control 63% of Thorn Industries." "Excellent." Arthur took a sip of his scotch. "And the media?" "Everything's ready. One word from you, and Julian's blackmail operation goes public. We have evidence of at least 12 cases where he forced competitors to sell their companies at a fraction of their worth." "What about Detective Vargas?" "She's been very thorough. The safety violation cover-ups particularly interested her. 3 dead workers. Julian paid off their families. But one widow kept copies of everything." Arthur nodded, though Hector couldn't see it. "Release the blackmail evidence to the press. All of it. Let's see how Julian handles fighting on multiple fronts." Within hours, news alerts began flooding Julian's phone. Breaking. Thorn Industries CEO accused of systematic blackmail. Multiple victims come forward. The board meeting descended into chaos as members read the breaking news on their phones. Julian stood alone at the head of the table, his authority evaporating with each passing second. "This meeting is adjourned," Matthews announced. "Julian, consider yourself suspended pending a full investigation." "You can't do this to me." Julian's composure finally broke. "I built this company from nothing. None of you would be here without me. Security will escort you out." Matthews continued as if Julian hadn't spoken. "Don't attempt to access any company systems or contact any employees. Your credentials have already been revoked." In the lobby of Thorn Industries, Vivian watched in horror as Julian was escorted out by security, his face twisted with rage. She stepped forward to join him, but he waved her away. "Not now," he hissed. "Go home. I'll handle this." But there was nothing left to handle. As they exited the building, Reporters swarmed them, shouting questions about blackmail, safety violations, and financial fraud. From his office, Arthur made another call. "Bart, proceed with Phase 2. Let's see how Julian enjoys fighting for his freedom while his empire crumbles." As news helicopters circled the Thorne Industries building, Arthur raised his glass in a silent toast. The game was proceeding exactly as planned, and his opponents still had no idea who they were really playing against. The headlines grew more damning with each passing day. Thorne Industries stock in free fall. CEO's criminal empire exposed. Federal investigation launched into corporate corruption. Julian sat in his home office, surrounded by financial reports and legal documents, looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. His phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters, lawyers, and increasingly angry investors. "Julian?" Vivian entered cautiously. "The housekeeper says you haven't eaten since yesterday." "Can't eat," he muttered, scanning another document. "Have to find who's behind this. Sterling Holdings. There has to be a connection." The bank called again. Vivian pressed. "They're freezing our accounts, pending the investigation. And the credit cards. They've all been canceled." This got his attention. All of them. Even the offshore ones. Everything. She sank into a chair. "Julian, what's happening? You promised me security. Luxury. Now they're saying we might lose everything." "We won't lose anything." He slammed his fist on the desk. "This is a temporary setback. I have safeguards, contingency plans." His phone rang. Bart Finch's number appeared on the screen. "Julian Thorne." "Mr. Thorne." Bart's voice was professionally pleasant. "I'm calling to inform you that Sterling Holdings has called for an emergency shareholder meeting. As the majority shareholder, they're exercising their right to reconstitute the board of directors." Majority shareholder. Julian's voice cracked. "That's impossible. I control this company." "I have the documentation right here," Bart continued calmly. "Through various entities, Sterling Holdings controls 63% of Thorne Industries shares. The meeting is scheduled for tomorrow. At 9 a.m. Your presence is optional." The line went dead. Julian stared at the phone, then hurled it against the wall. "This can't be happening. This can't be happening." Vivian watched him unravel with growing horror. This wasn't the powerful, confident man who had promised her the world. This was someone else entirely. Desperate, unhinged, dangerous. "I need to see Arthur," she declared suddenly. Julian barely looked up. "Sterling? Your ex? What could he possibly?" "He's smart with business," Vivian insisted. "Maybe he can help. Give you, us, advice." Julian's laugh was borderline hysterical. "The man you left because he was too mediocre, because he lacked ambition. Now you want his help. I'm trying to save us." "There is no us," Julian roared. "There's me, trying to save my company while you worry about credit cards and renovations. Get out. Get out." Vivian fled the office, her designer heels clicking on the marble floors. She grabbed her phone, scrolling to Arthur's number. After 5 rings, his familiar voice answered. "Hello, Vivian." "Arthur, please. I need to see you. It's important." A long pause. "Very well. My office. 1 hour." Arthur's new office occupied the top floor of a sleek downtown building. Vivian found him standing behind his desk, looking impeccable in a tailored suit. Nothing like the conservative dresser she remembered. "Well?" His voice was cold, professional. "What's so important?" "Everything's falling apart," she burst out. "Julian's company, our assets. There are investigations, accusations. I didn't know, Arthur. I swear I didn't know about any of it." "Didn't know?" Arthur's smile was terrifying in its calmness. "Or didn't want to know? The safety violations, the blackmail, the fraud. Were you too busy spending his money to notice where it came from?" "That's not fair." "Fair?" Arthur moved around the desk. "Let's talk about fair, Vivian. You threw away 27 years of marriage for a criminal who impressed you with stolen wealth. You called me mediocre, boring, lacking in ambition. How's that working out for you? Realization dawned in her eyes. Sterling Holdings. It's you. Very good. He nodded approvingly. Yes, I own 63% of Thorn Industries. Have for years, actually. Julian was so focused on appearing powerful, he never noticed who was really pulling the strings. You destroyed him. Us? Just for revenge. Revenge. Arthur laughed softly. No, Vivian. This isn't revenge. This is justice. Julian built his empire on fraud, blackmail, and murder. I'm simply exposing the truth. Please, she whispered. I'll lose everything. Everything you gain through his crimes, yes. Arthur returned to his desk. Consider it a valuable lesson in karma. I'm sorry, Vivian's voice cracked. I made a mistake. I see that now. Maybe we cooled. Arthur's voice cut like a blade. You made your choice, Vivian. You chose wealth over loyalty, status over honor. Now you can live with the consequences. He pressed a button on his desk. Security will show you out. As Vivian was led away, her tears gave way to anger. Arthur's phone buzzed. A message from Bart. Shareholder meeting preparations complete. Julian's removal is guaranteed. Another message, this one from Hector. Detective Vargas has enough for an arrest warrant. Should I give her the final piece of evidence? Arthur smiled, remembering Julian's boast about owning a yacht, taking spontaneous trips to Monaco. Yes, he typed back. Show her everything. The next morning, Arthur sat at the head of the Thorn Industries boardroom table, watching Julian's former board members file in. None of them would meet his eyes. They knew their complicity in Julian's schemes would have consequences. Gentlemen, Arthur began, his voice calm and commanding. Welcome to the new era of Thorn Industries. Though I suppose we'll need a new name to go with our new direction. Any suggestions? Before anyone could respond, the boardroom doors burst open. Detective Vargas entered, flanked by federal agents. Julian Thorn, she announced, holding up a warrant. You're under arrest for securities fraud, conspiracy, and negligent homicide. Julian, who had been glaring at Arthur from across the table, shot to his feet. You can't do this, he bellowed, but his voice faltered as the agents approached. Arthur watched passively as Julian was cuffed. The former CEO's protests grew weaker with every step toward the door. His final words before being led away. I built this company. You won't get away with this. The agents and Detective Vargas escorted Julian out, leaving the stunned board members in silence. Now then, Arthur said smoothly, turning back to the table. About that new direction. The media frenzy surrounding Julian Thorn's arrest dominated every news channel. Reporters camped outside the federal courthouse, their cameras capturing his transformation from powerful CEO to accused criminal. Inside a courthouse holding cell, Julian sat alone, his designer suit wrinkled, his arrogance replaced by desperation. His high-priced lawyer paced before him. It's bad, the lawyer admitted. The evidence is overwhelming. Tax fraud, corporate espionage, illegal stock manipulation, and the safety violations. 3 dead workers, Julian. 3 families who lost loved ones because you cut corners. Can you get me out of this? Julian's voice was barely a whisper. Out? No. The best we can hope for is a plea deal. Otherwise, you're looking at 20 to 30 years. Vivian watched the courthouse footage on her phone, sitting in a small diner where she had managed to get a job as a waitress. Her uniform was cheap polyester, a far cry from her designer wardrobe, most of which had been seized as evidence of criminal proceeds. Order up. The cook's voice snapped her back to reality. She tucked her phone away, grabbing plates of greasy food. As she served table 6, she caught her reflection in the window. No more perfect makeup, no more expensive jewelry, just a woman in a waitress uniform, looking older than her years. Her phone buzzed. Another rejected call to Arthur. She tried dozens of times, but he never answered. The few times she'd gone to his office, security had turned her away. The diner's TV showed footage of Thorne Industries, now Sterling Enterprises, announcing its new direction. Arthur stood at the podium, confident and commanding, outlining plans for corporate reform and community investment. "Can you believe it?" one customer remarked to another. "Guy owns the company for years, watching that crook Thorne run it into the ground. Then swoops in and cleans house. Now that's what I call playing the long game." Vivian dropped a plate, earning a sharp reprimand from her manager. She fled to the bathroom, tears streaming down her face. This was her new reality, serving coffee to people discussing her ex-husband's triumph and her lover's disgrace. Julian's trial was swift and devastating. The evidence was irrefutable, the witnesses numerous. Former victims of his blackmail schemes came forward, eager to testify. Families of the dead workers told their stories. Former employees revealed years of corruption and intimidation. Arthur attended each day of the trial, sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom. He watched as Julian's empire crumbled, as his reputation was shredded, as his freedom was stripped away. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. 25 years in federal prison. All assets forfeited. Millions in fines and restitution. As Julian was led away in handcuffs, he caught Arthur's eye for the first time. In that moment, he finally understood. All those years of thinking he was untouchable, he'd been nothing but a pawn in someone else's game. Later that evening, Arthur sat in his office, watching the city lights below. His phone buzzed. Another message from Vivian. Like all the others, he deleted it without reading. Hector entered with a final report. "It's done, sir. Julian's offshore accounts have been frozen. His hidden assets have been seized. Vivian's attempts to access any remaining funds have been blocked. They're both completely ruined." "Good," Arthur nodded. "And the company?" "Stock price is rebounding under the new management. The employees are relieved, especially after you announced the new safety protocols and worker protection programs." Arthur smiled, but it was a cold expression. He had achieved everything he'd set out to do. Julian was destroyed. Vivian was humbled. And he had transformed their instrument of corruption into something useful. "Sir," Hector hesitated. "What about Vivian? She keeps trying to contact you." "Let her try." Arthur turned back to the window. "Some betrayals can't be forgiven, Hector. Some choices have permanent consequences." As night fell over the city, Arthur raised his glass in a silent toast. The game was over, and he had won completely. Julian Thorne had learned the cost of underestimating Arthur Sterling. The next morning's papers carried photos of Julian being transported to federal prison, his designer suit replaced by an orange jumpsuit. The headlines were merciless. "Thorne falls. Corporate titan begins 25-year sentence. From penthouse to prison. Thorne's tragic fall from grace." At her small studio apartment, all she could afford on a waitress's salary, Vivian spread the newspapers across her kitchen table. Her hands trembled as she read the details of Julian's sentencing. The man who had promised her the world couldn't even afford his own legal defense anymore. Her phone rang. Her landlord, demanding the rent she was 3 days late paying. She ignored it, staring instead at a photo of Arthur at the courthouse. He looked powerful, confident, everything Julian had pretended to be. "You were never mediocre," she whispered to his image. "I was just too blind to see it." At Sterling Enterprises, formerly Thorne Industries, Arthur presided over another board meeting. The transition was complete. Julian's corrupt board members had been replaced, his illegal practices exposed and eliminated. His empire transformed into something entirely new. "The final audit is complete," Bart reported, spreading documents across the table. "Every trace of Julian's corruption has been identified and eliminated. The company is clean and profitable," added another board member. "Our stock has rebounded completely. The market loves the new transparency and focus on ethical business practices." Arthur nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. Julian thought power came from fear and corruption. He never understood that true power comes from patience, planning, and precision. As the board members filed out, Hector entered with a final update. "Sir, Detective Vargas asked me to inform you. They found Julian's hidden files. The ones detailing all his victims, all his schemes. She says the evidence will help dozens of people recover what he stole from them. Make sure those files reach the right authorities," Arthur instructed. "Everyone Julian hurt deserves justice." "And Vivian?" Hector asked carefully. "She was at the diner again today, asking about you." Arthur's expression hardened. "She made her choice, Hector. She chose wealth over loyalty, glamour over substance. Now she can live with the consequences." The sun set on another day in the city. In his prison cell, Julian Thorne stared at the wall, his empire destroyed, his reputation ruined, his future reduced to counting the days of his 25-year sentence. In her small apartment, Vivian counted the tips from her shift, wondering how she'd afford next month's rent. And in his office, Arthur Sterling reviewed the final reports of his victory, knowing that justice had been served. The game was over. The pieces had fallen exactly as he planned. Julian and Vivian had learned the hard way that betrayal carried a price, and Arthur Sterling always collected his debts in full. The boardroom of the former Thorne Industries buzzed with anticipation as Arthur Sterling stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding attention without effort. Gone was any trace of the mediocre man Vivian had dismissed. In his place stood someone who had orchestrated one of the most spectacular corporate takedowns in recent history. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying easily across the room. "Thorne Industries was built on corruption, blackmail, and human suffering. Today, we begin its transformation." He pressed a button, and the screen behind him revealed a new logo. Sterling Enterprises. We're not just changing the name. We're changing everything. Bart Finch, still flamboyant but now tempered with purpose, distributed detailed prospectuses to the board members. "Our first initiative focuses on corporate ethics and worker protection. The safety violations that cost 3 lives under Thorne's leadership. Never again." "What about the shareholders?" one board member asked nervously. "They've already suffered significant losses." Arthur's smile was razor-sharp. "Have they? Check the numbers, George. Since we exposed Julian's corruption and implemented our new policies, our stock has risen 40%. Turns out ethical business practices are profitable." He moved around the table, his presence making each board member sit straighter. "We're establishing a Women in Business initiative. Full scholarships for business degrees, mentorship programs, leadership training. I want every woman who's been held back, overlooked, or abandoned to have a chance at success." "That's unusually specific," another board member observed. "Is it?" Arthur's tone carried a warning. "Or is it addressing a systemic problem that men like Julian Thorne perpetuated? How many female executives did he drive out? How many careers did he destroy?" The board members shifted uncomfortably, remembering their own complicity in Julian's regime. Arthur let them stew in their discomfort. "Speaking of Julian," he continued, "his conviction gives us a unique opportunity. Every company he blackmailed, every competitor he destroyed, we're going to make it right." Bart stood, adjusting his signature bow tie. "We've identified 23 companies that Julian forced into disadvantageous sales through blackmail. We're offering them fair market value buybacks or partnerships. Their choice." "The coast," someone started to protest, "will be covered by the assets we recovered from Julian's hidden accounts." Arthur cut in. "Poetic justice, wouldn't you say? His victims rebuilt by his own stolen wealth." The door opened, and Evelyn Hayes entered, carrying a portfolio. Arthur's expression softened fractionally, not enough to show weakness, but enough to acknowledge her presence. She took a seat next to him, spreading out her documents. "Ms. Hayes has been working with us to develop our community outreach programs." Arthur introduced her. She has particular expertise in helping women rebuild their lives after personal and professional setbacks. Evelyn's voice was soft but carried steel beneath it. Sterling Enterprises has an opportunity to do more than make profits. We can create real change. The shelter program we're developing. Shelter program. A board member interrupted. We're a corporation, not a charity. Arthur's hand slammed down on the table, making everyone jump. We're whatever I say we are. Or have you forgotten who owns controlling interest? His voice was arctic. Anyone uncomfortable with our new direction is welcome to resign. There are plenty of corrupt corporations hiring. No one moved. No one spoke. As I was saying, Evelyn continued, unruffled by the interruption, the shelter program will provide temporary housing, job training, and support services. We've already identified 3 suitable properties. The first opens next month, Arthur added. I expect everyone in this room to attend the opening. Show your support. Prove you understand our new priorities. After the meeting, Arthur and Evelyn walked to his office. She watched him pour his customary scotch. You enjoyed that, she observed, terrifying the board. Always. He offered her a glass, which she declined. They need to understand this isn't just corporate window dressing. We're rebuilding everything from the ground up. The shelter program means a lot to you, she said softly. Arthur stared out at the city. I watched Vivian throw away 27 years for wealth and status. How many other women make similar choices because they feel trapped? Helpless. He turned back to her. I destroyed Julian because he deserved it. But that destruction can serve a greater purpose. And Vivian? Evelyn asked carefully. I heard she's still trying to contact you. Let her try. His voice was granite. Some bridges stay burned. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. He moved closer to Evelyn, reaching into his desk drawer and withdrawing a small box. I had planned something more elaborate, but this feels right. He opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring. Elegant but not ostentatious. Marry me. Evelyn studied him carefully. Are you sure? After everything with Vivian. Unsure about you, he cut her off. You see the world as it is but work to make it better. You understand that strength doesn't preclude compassion. And you've never once asked me to be less than what I am. Even when what you are is terrifying, she smiled slightly. Especially then. He held out the ring. Build this new chapter with me, Evelyn. Help me turn Sterling Enterprises into something unprecedented. A corporation that combines profitability with purpose. She took the ring, slipping it onto her finger. Yes, but on one condition. His eyebrow raised. Which is? The shelter. I want Clara involved. She understands what these women need because she's lived it. Arthur smiled. A real smile, not the cold one he showed the board. Already arranged. Hector's running background checks on potential staff. Clara will be deputy director, reporting directly to you. Evelyn kissed him softly. You think of everything, don't you? It's why I win, he said simply, returning to his desk. Now, about the shelter's opening ceremony. The Phoenix Nest Shelter stood as a testament to careful planning and attention to detail. Once a neglected apartment building, it had been transformed into a modern facility with private rooms, training spaces, and offices. The sign above the entrance was elegant but understated. A phoenix rising from flames, symbolizing rebirth. Inside her office, Evelyn reviewed applications with Clara, both women focused on their shared mission. Another one from Vivian Sterling. Clara noted, holding up a letter. She's persistent. Arthur won't change his mind. Evelyn replied without looking up. But she fits our criteria. Abandoned woman, no resources. She wasn't abandoned. Evelyn's voice was firm. She chose to leave a good man for wealth and status. There are women here who truly need our help. Vivian made her choices. The intercom buzzed. Miss Hayes, Mr. Sterling is here. Arthur entered, impeccably dressed as always. He kissed Evelyn briefly, nodded to Clara, then got straight to business. How are the preparations for next week's opening? On schedule, Clara reported. We have 15 women moving in initially, all screened, all committed to the program. Job training? Arthur asked. Partnerships with 3 companies besides Sterling Enterprises, Evelyn answered. Tech training, financial services, healthcare administration. Real careers, not just jobs. Arthur nodded approvingly. Security. Top of the line, Clara assured him. No one gets in without clearance. The women will be safe here. Good. Arthur moved to the window, watching workers install the final security cameras. I want this place to be everything I promised. A real chance for women to rebuild their lives. It already is, Evelyn assured him. She hesitated, then continued. Arthur, Vivian has applied again. His expression hardened. No. I already declined her, Evelyn confirmed. But she's getting desperate. The diner fired her for missing too many shifts. She's facing eviction. Good. Arthur's voice was ice. Let her experience the consequences of her choices. The shelter is for women who deserve help, not for those who threw everything away for greed. Clara spoke up carefully. Some might say that's harsh. Arthur turned to her, his expression unyielding. Harsh. I gave Vivian 27 years of loyalty, stability, and respect. She called me mediocre, threw her wedding ring at me, and ran off with a criminal because he bought her expensive toys. His voice could have frozen fire. She deserves everything she's experiencing. The shelter's your vision, Clara conceded. Your rules. No, Arthur corrected her. It's our vision. Yours, Evelyn's, mine. We're building something unprecedented here, a place where women can find not just refuge, but renaissance. He softened slightly. Your input matters, Clara. Just not about Vivian. Later that week, Arthur and Evelyn hosted a private dinner for their core team. Hector, Bart, Clara, and several key shelter staff gathered at their penthouse. The files from Julian's trial proved invaluable. Bart reported over dinner. We've identified dozens of women he harassed or forced out of their positions. We're reaching out, offering them leadership roles in Sterling Enterprises. Proper roles, Arthur emphasized, based on their qualifications, not as charity cases. The shelter's already gaining attention, Clara added. I had calls from 3 other cities asking about our model. Expansion comes later, Arthur cautioned. First, we prove the concept here. Show the world that helping women succeed is good business. The dinner was interrupted by an urgent call from shelter security. Ms. Hayes, the guard said, Vivian Sterling is here. She's demanding to see Mr. Sterling and causing a scene. Arthur's expression darkened. I'll handle this. Arthur, Evelyn started. No. He stood. Some things require a personal touch. At the shelter, Vivian waited in the lobby, her once designer clothes now worn and shabby. She straightened when Arthur entered. Arthur, please. Stop. His voice cut like a knife. You don't belong here, Vivian. This place is for women who deserve help. I have nowhere else to go, she pleaded. The diner fired me. My landlord's evicting me. Not my problem. He stepped closer, his presence intimidating. You had everything. A home, a marriage, respect. You threw it away for Julian's blood money and fancy trinkets. Now you can live with that choice. I made a mistake. Tears streaked her makeup. I see that now. You were never mediocre. You were brilliant, patient, playing the long game while Julian and I were too stupid to see it. Yes, Arthur agreed coldly. You were stupid and arrogant and greedy. The shelter helps women who've been victimized, abandoned, abused. You're just experiencing the consequences of your own choices. What do you want me to say? Vivian cried. That I'm sorry. That I was wrong. That I've lost everything. I don't want you to say anything. I want you to leave. Never come back. Never contact me, Evelyn, or anyone associated with the shelter again. He turned to security. Escort her out. She's permanently banned from the premises." As Vivian was led away, sobbing, Arthur felt nothing. No satisfaction. No pity. No regret. She had made her choice. Now she could live with it. He returned to the dinner where Evelyn waited. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. "Handled," he replied simply. Then he turned to his guests. "Now, about those expansion plans." The grand opening of the Phoenix Nest drew media attention from across the country. The shelter's unique model, combining housing, job training, and corporate partnerships, captured imaginations and challenged assumptions. Arthur stood at the podium, Evelyn beside him, addressing the gathered crowd. Board members, corporate partners, and most importantly, the shelter's first residents filled the seats. "The Phoenix Nest represents more than a shelter," Arthur began. "It represents possibility, the possibility of transformation, of rebirth, of rising from the ashes of betrayal and loss to build something stronger." He gestured to the women in the audience. "Every woman here has a story of trust betrayed, of dreams deferred, of choices forced upon them by circumstances or manipulative men." His eyes swept the crowd. Today, those stories change. Today, they begin writing new chapters. Evelyn stepped forward. "The Phoenix Nest offers more than refuge. We offer opportunity, education, career training, a chance to rebuild not just lives, but futures." The ceremony continued with tours, interviews, and networking. Corporate partners mingled with shelter residents, already identifying potential talent. The media captured everything, spreading the message nationwide. In the shelter's garden, Arthur and Evelyn found a quiet moment alone. "You did it," she said softly. "We did it," he corrected her. "This was never just about revenge, Evelyn. It was about justice, real justice." Movement at the garden gate caught their attention. A thin figure in an orange jumpsuit was cleaning the street, part of a prison work detail. Julian Thorne looked up, his eyes meeting Arthur's. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Julian, once powerful and arrogant, now broken and humbled. Arthur, having transformed his vengeance into vision, his pain into purpose. Without a word, Arthur turned away, leaving Julian to his menial task. The past was done. The future awaited. Back inside, Clara was showing visitors the training facilities. Every woman here has access to education, from GED completion to corporate leadership training. We don't just help them escape bad situations, we help them build good ones. The day ended with a private celebration for the shelter's staff and residents. Arthur raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he toasted. "To transformation. To the power of rising stronger from life's hardest moments." Later, in their penthouse, Arthur and Evelyn stood together, looking out at the city. The shelter's sign was visible in the distance, illuminated against the night sky. "Was it worth it?" Evelyn asked softly. "All of it." Arthur considered the question. Julian's in prison, paying for his crimes. Vivian's experiencing the consequences of her choices. And we've built something that will help countless women avoid similar fates. He smiled slightly. "Yes, it was worth it." "And you? Are you happy?" He turned to her. "I'm satisfied. Justice has been served. And from that justice, something good has grown." He touched her cheek gently. "You helped me see that revenge alone wasn't enough. That real power lies in creation, not just destruction." "But you'll never forgive them," she noted. "Never," he agreed firmly. "Some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness, but we can use them. Transform them into fuel for change." He gestured toward the shelter sign. "Every woman who rebuilds her life, there is a testament to that transformation." The Phoenix Nest glowed in the distance, a beacon of hope and possibility. Arthur Sterling had achieved his revenge, but in doing so, he'd created something larger than himself. Not forgiveness, never that, but purpose. A legacy built from the ashes of betrayal, stronger and more meaningful than mere vengeance could ever be. The game was over. The phoenix had risen, and the future stretched out before them, full of possibility.